The Ascent of Woman. Amanda Foreman's empowering plunge at the patriarchy retells the erased history of women. The Anthropological expedition highlights the tumultuous journey of women over 100,000 years, and their buried roles throughout history. The narrative of Man the Hunter presupposes that men provided the nutrition, invented the tools, and established social organization and communication throughout the hunt, she says, and that women were just sitting by the fire waiting for evolution to drag them out by the hair in the 1960s in order to participate. But that's simply a story told by late 19th century paleontologists and is playing out in dioramas in natural history museums throughout the world. Other narratives are just as plausible, for example, that women invented language through communicating with their offspring, and that the tool could just as easily been cudgels for mashing and digging sticks for food. Amanda Foreman. The history of women in America and all over the globe has been a quite nonlinear one, filled with triumph, loss, sacrifice. But in this groundbreaking 4-part docu-series, Amanda Foreman charts the integral role of women in various societies and cultures throughout the globe. Amanda Foreman, British historian, biographer, and overall badass, provides to the world of women an anthropological antidote, diving deeply into the development of patriarchal systems and how they both oppressed and erased significant female role models throughout history. Rocking red lipstick and just the right amount of sass, Foreman highlights the evolution of women in 4 hours, from around 8000 BC to modern day. While traveling across multiple continents, Foreman gathers research from museums, notorious archaeological sites, and interviews women from different cultural backgrounds, accumulating diverse data to seize truth slanted by our male-dominated historical narratives. Through her feminine lens, she unearths the facts. Women deserve a seat at the throne of cultural contribution and innovation. Archaeology. There's a huge difference between demanding something that has never happened before and demanding something back that was taken from us by civilization, she says. It's an incredibly liberating point. Visiting the archaeological site of the prehistoric settlement of Anatolia, one of the first civilizations ever discovered, Foreman relays interesting evidence that this ancient group of humans dating back to before 8000 BC in what is now Turkey was believed by archaeologists to have been completely egalitarian both in gender and in class, bearing no distinguishable differences in either diet or burial rites. From what was gathered, there were no signs of larger homes either. The team of scientists inferred that these hive-like structures had potential to become bigger, but for some reason had a cap, an imposed limit that kept them more uniform. Quite the opposing pivot from the type of debris a future historian might discover from our modern scraps, with our grandiose capitalist gaps in both class and gender. Other findings also stressed communal ties as opposed to blood ties, as DNA testing confirmed it was not nuclear families that were buried together in these homes like we might expect to see or what we're used to in our culture, but a variety of different DNA supports the theory of a more integrated social structure between these humans.
Astonishingly, the burials also stressed communal ties rather than blood ties or gender, suggesting that even the family didn't exist in the way we know it.
Some ancient discoveries believed if a skeleton with a necklace was found, it was definitely a female. Likewise, any skeleton with weapons would safely be assumed to be the bones of a man. Not until later, when it became possible to determine gender through analyzing bones, did they realize this was not the case. Females were buried with a variety of weapons, indicating their role as warriors in their tribe. In one burial, a 14-year-old girl was buried with over 40 bronze arrowheads. Young girls were not just found with adornments and jewels, but wore tools and objects to make tattoos also. They were often attributed with the responsibility of the spiritual life, making women's social roles higher than men's. In ancient Samaritan wars in the Second World War, it was women who performed the role of snipers, using long-range weapons like bows and sniper rifles to defeat their enemies and keep distance. Amanda uses this to propel her argument and advocate for an updated timeline of history, one undiluted by male historians and slanted facts that for years have silenced women in their contributions to human evolution.
But if the story of women is put back into history, the uncomfortable truth is that its benefits have been ambiguous.
Art. Women's representation in historical art, including their displays, figurines, or lack of display at all, is a vital source of information that speaks to fundamental ideas of how early societies organized themselves. Where Egyptian art embraced the masculine and feminine identities in their peoples, featuring statues of men and women together, sometimes wearing the same clothes, presenting them as equals.
As seen in its art, replete with couples lovingly holding hands, even wearing the same clothes,
Some did not, such as early Athenian societies whose obsession with statues and social purity reflected in their artwork. This highlights a striking paradox, for Aphrodite and other notorious goddesses were nearly the only women among the world of ancient civilizations that were presented with such a central role. Yet at the same time, they ruthlessly excluded women from public life, and real women presented in the art of the time were displayed very differently. Submissive portrayals indicate they were demanded for their obedience and chastity, honored mostly for their ability to produce sons and perpetuate the family line.
From the goddesses Athena to Aphrodite, there is no other civilization in the ancient world that gave images of female power such a central role.
Women, the secondary sex. In nearly every civilization, women have been deemed the secondary sex. It has been so ingrained that it has become written into history as a biological truth. The so-called inherent inferiorities possessed by women relative to their male counterparts is a tool used by patriarchal systems that were formed in fear of their power. In ancient codes, it is clear that when men recognized the importance of women, they made it so women could not know this themselves.
So that there's night and day and good and evil, and of course there's male and female.
Urging men to devalue them as property in order to monetize on their capacity for childbearing. How much they were needed was feared, so men had to ensure that this knowledge of their importance was severely underplayed. Women were eventually signed into law as property of their fathers and sold off as virgins to their new husbands, the highest bidders.
This system of marriage broking was adopted by all noble families, and it led to strange tensions in the status of women.
If a woman was raped, for example, this was not an offense to the woman, but seen as an offense to her father, who owned her as an extension of his own capital. Not only was she raped, but she was now a depreciating asset as a non-virgin female. As various female leaders, artists, intellectuals, architects, scientists, and political voices have been erased throughout history, it is clear that women had been a vital part in the development of the modern world, without the credit they deserve.
And in the Elizabethan period, feminine words are loaded with meaning.
They suffered greatly, but many women stood up against these mongrels and assisted in fashioning some of the liberties we now know today as women. Amanda Foreman showcases several women across multiple cultures that made groundbreaking ripples for women everywhere.
Her name was Roxolana, and she became the most infamous woman in Ottoman history.
The world's first novel ever written was written by a woman. Murasaki Shikibu, Theodora, the Byzantine empress, was probably the most powerful woman in Byzantine history. From concubine to chief court advisor, rebuilding and reforming Constantinople with her intelligence, political acumen, and fortitude. There are so many more to name, but women in power are often so scrutinized. Although Foreman displays a rich history of several women in her 4-hour series, we can be sure that there were numerous others whose history, contributions, and voices were also silenced. That said, this is powerfully illuminating for women. It is inspiring, validating, and empowering. Freedom and equality for women has not been a simple uphill battle, but nuanced with progress followed by digression. Fights that were won and fights that were lost. One thing is absolutely certain, though, is that women are fundamentally equal to men, humans are fundamentally equal to one another, and our cooperation and inclusion of all people in this respect is the only thing that will allow us to successfully evolve and maintain harmony with the planet, other people, and ourselves. The Ascent of Woman is streaming all 4 parts on YouTube for free.